Hey, deserving listeners, 90-Day Fiancé, let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Remember that everything I say when I'm reacting to these shows is completely speculative, based on very little information. Let's keep that in mind. Let's watch.
I was thinking in the moment that I get here, I really wanted to have my computer. I mean, I need to buy little things, but also I really
Little things like a computer?
I mean, that's one of the things, you know?
You've never used a computer in your life. Why do you need it now?
I had a computer in the yard.
Okay, and what did you use it for?
All right, so I haven't been commenting on this couple because there wasn't a lot of things to say, but there are signs of a parent-child dynamic developing, which the show is leaning into by having these scenes where she's saying that she's a cougar and that she's robbing the cradle and making jokes about that, and he doesn't like that. So in this conflict, it seems to be manifesting that way, where he is I don't know, but I think he might be asking for something that is very expensive and not thinking about the budget, which is a childish thing to do. And she is talking to him the way a parent would, which is to deny it or to not work as peers together on a budget. You know, I'm always saying to the cast members that you should be having conversations about the budget. You know, when Larissa asks Holt for expensive things, when Anfisa asks George for expensive things, when, various different conversations around this. I guess Victor and Ellie were... and by the way, I have a friend who lives in the building that Ellie works in. Ellie is apparently, on the show, if you watched that season, talked about how she had sold her part of the business, the pizza shop. And I heard through my friend, Chong, who lives above that building, above the pizza shop, has interacted with Ellie and found out that she still owns the restaurant, at least partially, and is back working there. And Victor is there. I don't want to spoil anything, but Victor also has been working there, and my friend Chong has been interacting with Victor and Ellie. And so I still haven't been there, though. It's kind of across town in Seattle, and it's not that far, maybe half-hour drive or something, but and the pizza actually looks pretty good, and I'm a pizza fan. So now that it's getting sunny out, I don't know, it'd be nice. But now that I think about it, if I walk in there, what do I introduce myself? By the way, I know you very well, or, your persona on TV. But so, and I didn't react that much to them because I, again, didn't really find there was much for me to offer the world in terms of reaction to that. But anyway, so we saw, and we've seen in many couples where there will be this top-down style of communication instead of recognizing that you are equals and that you should be able to talk about budgeting together. Because now one could argue that that's a cultural ideal that I have, being my wife. That's what we do. And there's a lot of nuances to that, of course, but that's my ideal. I don't want to be talking down to someone about that sort of thing, and I don't want to be talked down to in that way. But you could argue that in some cultures that's what they want, and there's nothing wrong with taking on different roles. But if someone for example, if Larissa and Colt, if Larissa didn't want to be involved in the budgeting, who knows, maybe she did, but for the sake of argument, let's say she didn't, then okay, but that carries with it some disadvantages, which means that you don't get to make decisions about things. And when the person that you gave control to voluntarily, if you gave it voluntarily, refuses to buy something, you have to accept that, because their burden is making sure that you don't run out of money and that you're able to pay your bills and that you're able to have money to do things in the future. So there are pros and cons to that role, right? Anyway, so we're heading into a conversation like that with them. I'm trying to think of other signs of the parent-child. There was a little bit of it when they landed in the States, and it was actually really cute when Guillermo was looking around. I think they're driving around in Virginia in the countryside with the farms and the cows and the hay bales. He's like, your cows look different here, and oh my God, everything's so big and beautiful, and your hay bales are so organized. Like I've never seen it. Everything's so clean, and And I like that, because when I travel, I will have a similar kind of enthusiasm about the different things that I'm seeing. That's part of the reason why you travel. And he seemed to be in that zone, which was nice to see. And then Kara was saying, "Oh my God, it's so cute. I'm so glad that you're enjoying it. And I've always wanted to show you around." And it wasn't overtly this way, but it had a parent-child connotation of a mom showing her son something new and saying, "Look, we're at the zoo. Look, it's giraffes, sonny." Now, I'm exaggerating. That's not okay for me to do, but there seems to be a dynamic developing. So let's see how they manage this conversation.
Well, I didn't use it because I was working in different things, but I need to start my life too.
Yeah, great. Well, let's just start with like a toothbrush then. I'm like a little bit like blindsided at...
So her attitude is a little interesting. I don't know what to make of it. She could use her words instead of being, I think she's being sarcastic and I don't know if mocking is the word, but okay, fine. You want your own autonomy, your own things. Let's start with a toothbrush. It's a little demeaning to him. She could say something like, because he's asking for a computer, and she could say, "We can't afford that. I mean, I can buy that if we decided to spend the money that way, but we have other things that are more important." And the way he's talking, if their budget is limited, which it sounds like it is, and of course he can't work for a while, and I don't even know what his skill set is in, so who knows how long it'll take for him to get his career off the ground in terms of lucrativeness, that he is saying, I want a computer instead of, and that's such a child thing to say, right? That before thinking about budget, before having any reason for it, it's just like, I want things, instead of saying, well, let's take it step by step. I don't know if I need a computer, if we're on a budget. Let me start working. Like a common stereotype of a teenager would be going to the parents and saying, like, I need a computer for schoolwork, right? Instead of just saying, I think a computer would be cool. But anyway, let's see how they manage this.
This sudden want of a computer when he knows that we're on a tight budget right now. I'm like getting started in my real estate career, and he's not able to work for God knows how long. We have about $6,000 saved, so I don't think spending $1,000 on a laptop is the best way to be spending our money right now.
Okay, that's interesting. We almost never get a figure of what sort of money we're dealing with. So she laid it all out. We have $6,000 saved, and he's not going to be able to work legally for 6 months, I believe. And who knows, because I think this was filmed a while ago, and with the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, it's hard to know when he'll be able to work and how much he'll be able to earn. And sounds like she's trying to get her career off the ground. She called herself a Jill of all trades, I believe, and has a lot of interesting jobs that were kind of cool looking. Like the balloon job looked kind of fun. Me and my wife were like, oh, that job looks fun. So she was a massage therapist for a while, I think, other kinds of jobs. But yeah, she seems like a dynamic Renaissance woman, if you will. But at this phase, her real estate career is just trying to get off the ground. And for some people, it never gets off the ground. Real estate work is not a guarantee in terms of making money. You can make a lot of money if you end up working with the right clients and the right market. But so it sounds like she's unclear about, the uncertainty of their finances. So $6,000. Yeah. And in Virginia, where they're living, I'm guessing from, what was it, Dimwittle or whatever, where Julia and Brandon lived. I remember me and Stacy, because they were talking about affording a one-bedroom apartment, and we actually looked up the prices of rentals in that region, and because I don't know the prices in that region, and I remember thinking, was it $700 a month-ish or something like that? I don't know. That sounds low. I mean, that would be really low in Seattle. But anyway, let's just say 1,000. And yeah, if you have to get a place together.
We just have like money set aside to last the entire time that you're not working. But like computer, like I don't really know that that's like a thing that we can do right now.
I sold my bike. Maybe with the money for the bike, I can buy the computer. Why not?
Okay, well, that's like a sixth of our entire budget on one thing that you'll be using by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, as a person that budgets very carefully, I am on her side on this. It's like, okay, fine, yeah, you sold your bike, great, but that still doesn't mean that we have that much money to spare for what I think is something that you just think would be cool to have that's not necessary, certainly in the future. So I'm logistically on her side, but in terms of tone, so if I were there, I'd really try to slow this down and break down, like, what are you wanting right now? And how can you communicate the full picture? For him, I think what I would try to get him to get in touch with inside of himself is, well, what would it be? It would be something like, maybe it's he wants to fit in, that he's talked about how he's, excited to be in the States, the American dream, and he wants to be a part of society. And without a computer, he feels like maybe it'd be hard for him to do otherwise. Or he really feels like it'd be a good opportunity for him to, start going on his career, or at the very least entertain himself while she's at work, because he can't work for a while. Maybe there's something there. And so he could speak from that place of like, well, the reason I'm asking is because of this and this and this, and I understand, and then I would try to get him to empathize with her and understand where she's coming from. It's like, I understand where you're coming from in terms of budget, and I agree with you that we shouldn't just be throwing our money around, and I'm not entirely sure that it is a good use of spending the money, but here's why I want it. Here are the emotions that I feel like this is coming from. And that's the full, I would hope that he'd get there, but that could take literally months, if not years for me. I don't think for him it would take that long, but it's hard because we're not used to thinking that way. We're used to just blurting stuff out from the top of our minds and not really evaluating what's happening. And we become very righteous in our statement. It was just like, well, but I want a computer. And so what's wrong with you? You're being stingy. We have the money. What's wrong with you? It's our money, right? So instead of giving the full picture, which gives Kara an opportunity at the very least to understand where he's coming from, instead of looking at him like he's a child asking for candy or something. And then from her standpoint, I would try to get her to a place of understanding where all of her feelings are coming from, because I think what's happening right now for her is not necessarily a discussion about a computer, but a discussion about the safety of the relationship and their finances in general, and setting up a set of unspoken rules between the two of them that will guide them as they move forward. Because now they're starting their life in the United States, and they have to really think about a budget because they've lived together for almost a year. Dominican Republic, so they've been there for 11 months together. So they're one of the rare couples on the show that actually know each other prior to coming on the show. So many, you could argue Bilal and Shida know each other well because they've been dating for 2 years, but they've only seen each other in person for 7 days. And we all understand that, according to the track record on the show, that online relationship doesn't amount to much in terms of them really understanding each other and the way they come together. But anyway, so these two I have a lot of hope for because of that reason, but they do have this issue. So for her, I would hope that she would get to a place where she would say, okay, so I don't want to talk down to you, and we both have equal power in terms of the budget. So if you want to buy a computer and it's really important to you, then I guess, I'm going to have to say okay to it because our money is our money. But can I plead my case that I don't think it's a safe expenditure? Let's look at the budget. Let's look at rent. Let's look at the variability in my income coming up. And let's look at maybe other ways that you can get this need met, or maybe could we put it off a couple months just until we have a better idea of the finances. So that's my vote. What do you think about that? That's it. You can absolutely plead your case, but you don't have to talk down to someone in the way that I think she kind of is.
The money that I bring is like because I sold so many things in DR. It's my money.
It's our money.
Right, but in some point it's my money too, and I want to spend it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm on Kara's side on this because it's like, so my money is our money and your money is your money? That's the way a child thinks. And okay, so fine, you want to spend this. Does that mean that when the time comes and we have to pay rent and you can't afford it because you spent all of your money on this computer, then what? I don't understand. Like, so my money is your money and your money is your money.
I have a computer.
Right, but it's your computer.
I know.
I cannot touch your computer.
But it functions for both of us. It doesn't just open for me.
I won't touch your computer.
Why?
Because I'm sure that if with something in your computer, you're gonna get mad with me. And I don't really want to have like a problem for a...
I wonder if for him, this is a plea for autonomy. He wants to have power and control over his own life, maybe his own privacy, and having his own computer is a symbol of that for him. Yeah, absolutely. If he's coming from that place, then the feeling is valid. The budget might not be advised, but if he could speak from that place instead of arguing the way that they are doing, then maybe it would go better.
We also have to make sound decisions and agree on what we buy. I know there's things you want, and I want you to have them, right? But like, we got to do it in like a timely fashion.
Right, but I understand you want like to control those kind of things, but also I don't want to buy a computer in 5 months.
So she did a good job reining it in for the most part by saying, I want you to have those things, but it's hard because of the budget. So it's not like I'm just trying to prevent you from having what you want. Like that's not my goal here. I would love for you to have this thing, but our budget is kind of important. And then for him, he uses the control word, and then he's like, I know you want to control this. All right, so that word is going to hurt, and it's not fair because Kara is trying to help the two of them, and he's saying you're controlling, which is a strong word, right? And maybe he doesn't know that it's a strong word to Kara, but I'm guessing it would be. And I think that's another piece of evidence in terms of their dynamic that might have a lot of other manifestations of this parent-child dynamic where she might control a lot of things. And we saw signs of that in other scenes. And I don't think she's trying to control him. I just think she's trying to, I mean, $6,000 is not a lot of money with uncertain income coming up. Now, the other aspect of this, which I'm sure some of you are thinking of, is that, and Carrie kind of referred to this, is that for him, being basically a refugee, I don't know if he would identify that way, in DR, is for Kara, watching him, she recognized that he didn't really have to think about a budget. It wasn't really his way of, because he didn't need to or something, or he didn't have the luxury to think about budgeting because you were always living paycheck to paycheck or something. And if you had the money, you spend it. And if you didn't, you worked more. And somehow you just get by. You could imagine someone being on the run, politically or otherwise, and not really thinking about the long term because you don't have the luxury to do that. So you try to make do when you have money, and you also will try to get some pleasure out of life. In fact, this reminds me of when I was early in my life. That's a funny way to put it. When I was 19-ish, 20, in college, one summer I worked as an ice cream man. A friend of mine had a job doing this, and he set me up with the company. It was Ice Cream Joe. I don't know if it's a national thing, but in Seattle, the big ice cream. If you're maybe in other countries you don't know what an ice cream man is. It's someone who, and I suppose all genders will do this now, but it was in the past, I don't remember ever seeing a non-man doing it, that you have this small truck. We actually had converted mail trucks and, mail delivery trucks, and they're like little Jeeps. I think they're literally Jeeps, actually. And you drive around neighborhoods in suburbia with music playing to announce that the ice cream man is coming, and then kids come out of the woodwork and you stop and you sell ice cream, popsicles, this kind of thing. And so I had a job doing that one summer in South Everett. Actually, I lived in Seattle, but we split up the region into different zones so that the 50 or so Joe ice cream guys didn't work the same beat and compete with each other. And back then, I remember we were one of the only gigs in town. Like, we didn't have any competition. Now I feel like there's a lot of sort of mom and pop operations, smaller operations, but anyway. And it was kind of a weird job, incidentally, because I was self-employed in that I rented the truck. I bought the ice cream. I bought the dry ice to keep the ice cream cold. I bought the gas. And then when I sold the stuff, I could charge whatever I wanted to, and whatever profit I made was how much money I made that day. And so it was a kind of a genius setup, because the company, the Joe ice cream people, they made money no matter what, because you're the customer of them by renting all that stuff and buying all that stuff from them. And so they made money no matter what, and they didn't have to supervise us because they got paid no matter what, because we're all over the place. And because if you just paid us a wage, you could imagine the ice cream man just pulling over at a 7-Eleven and taking a nap and not selling anything, because there's no oversight. So, and then it motivated us to actually try to go to places that where it worked, right? Because we only got paid if we actually sold, and we had to sell enough to offset the expenses, and then we started making money. So for the first half of the day, you're just making up lost time there, and then you start making money. And I will say that I didn't make a lot of money, but I think I made more than I would have made at a minimum wage job. So, and it was a nice job because you had a lot of autonomy, and it was low pressure. It's pretty easy to do. My left arm was very, very tan because, I'm driving like this, and the sun was on it all day long. And I just remember one arm was very tan. And there's a lot of stories from it. But one of the things that I hypothesized based on the data was that, because I started noticing that when I went to neighborhoods where there was lower socioeconomic status, where they were the large buildings with cheaper apartment rentals, and there were neighborhoods in South Everett that were actually really rich seeming, like bigger houses, bigger yards, nicer cars. And I always figured that going to the nice neighborhood, I would make more money, but it was the complete opposite. In fact, it was such a stark difference that eventually I just stopped going to the nice, and some of the medium neighborhoods I stopped going to as well. I mean, part of it is that when you go to a big apartment complex, there's just more people that hear you. But even the standalone single home neighborhoods in the suburban areas were like this too. And the hypothesis I had was that when you are living in lower socioeconomic status, you don't have a lot of money, and you can't afford like vacations or computers or a new car or materialistic purchases that make you feel like you have some excitement in your life, I guess. Go to a nice restaurant, or even just go to a restaurant. And so you have to find pleasure where you can. And to buy an ice cream for me back then, the cheapest one I had was 25 cents. You could buy a twin pop, the kind that you can break apart. And that was 25 cents. And I think one of them, the most expensive thing I had was a Super Mario Brother. It looked like Super Mario's head, I believe. and it was $1.25. And whenever anyone bought that thing, I was like, ooh, lots of profit. Just imagine you sell like 5 of those Twin Pops, and I think I sold for like twice what I bought it for. So I'd make, what is that, like 25? It's like 35 cents or something. Anyway, so it was very little money. But anyway, point is that my hypothesis is that when you're living paycheck to paycheck, you are always thinking, well, I can't enjoy life the way rich people do, so I'm gonna enjoy it as I can find it. And so I'm gonna find this little treat, or I'm going to live paycheck. And maybe for him, that's where he comes from. Maybe even that's a dominant point of view in his community, that in DR, and maybe even Venezuela. I don't know. But so anyway, long story short, we could be seeing a clash in approaches to money, which would make sense given their backgrounds. And so thus they should have a conversation about that foundational place that each of them are coming from, because if they don't, and they don't acknowledge that they're coming from a different, shall we say, cultural place, then they could misinterpret the other person as being controlling or childish or disrespectful.
We have to make sure that you have the things you need right now, not want, because there's going to be things that come up that we're not planning on. We'll have to leave money for those things. That's why a computer doesn't make any sense right now, because we don't need it. We don't.
Her tone is edging into Parentville, if you will. And, but I don't know, I understand what she's saying, and I can relate to what she's saying, but I think he might be taking it like she's being condescending to him, which isn't going to bode well.
Don't need it. You don't need it.
I don't like her talking down to me, because she's like trying to make me feel like a little kid. We're spending money together.
Yes, and similar to Nicole and her family, you also act like a kid. Now, I don't know. Maybe Guillermo, if I understood this better, I would understand what he is asking for, and Kara is being unreasonable. But the way he's presenting it to me is that of someone that isn't thinking the way an adult does. Now, it could be a cultural difference as well, which isn't a childish thing, and we don't want to infantilize another culture the way that Americans often will do. So I could see absolutely a case for that. But at the very least, what a mature adult would present it as is, I totally get it. It is a big expenditure, and the way I role played it earlier, I won't repeat that.
We are building a life together. It's like, I just got here and you want to control me? I mean, she's not my mom.
Yeah, and so stop acting like you're her child. Have an approach that is that of a concerned, responsible adult. Again, maybe I'm reading it wrong. What do you think? Am I reading it wrong right now? Whenever I watch the show, I'm always wondering, who's going to fall out? How is this story going to fall out? Or how is it going to be interpreted, I guess is the way to say it more clearly. That who's going to be hated? Because when I start watching these shows, I'm usually thinking about the dynamic. I'm not looking at who do I want to hate, that kind of thing. Who do I want to blame? I hope it's clear from my language that they're both participating in it. She is treating him like a child with her tone, and he is treating her like a mom with his tone and with his content. So, they're both doing it at the same time. They're both to blame, or neither one of them is to blame. And I sometimes wonder who's going to be the one that everyone hates, because sometimes I get punished if I don't go along with that hatred. And so I'm worried, I guess I should just say, I have fear that Kara is going to come across as the bad person. And I've seen some indication of that already, of people attacking her online for using the word cougar, for saying that she's robbing the cradle. And so I'm worried that I'm going to be attacked because I'm not agreeing with that sentiment. But I don't know. I'd have a hard time seeing anyone hate Guillermo because he certainly doesn't exhibit the sort of behaviors that people typically will hate. But I'll tell you, if you've ever had a partner who was irresponsible and sort of forced you into a position where you had to be the parent of the two in this repetitive manner, it can be extremely frustrating. It can be very aggravating. And if you don't know what's happening, you don't understand the dynamic, then you just play along and okay, if you're going to act that way, then I'm going to have this tone with you. And you unwittingly play into the whole dynamic. And it's just as destructive and just as problematic and just as disrespectful and to some extent hostile to do what I think Guillermo is kind of doing in this situation. It's much easier to look at the Caras and say, look at her tone, she's a jerk face. And he just wants to buy a computer. He's just a nice guy. But that's often how the underfunctioner will come across. They'll often come across as easygoing and fun-loving. And of course, to us, we don't care because we don't care about their budget because it doesn't affect us. But it does to them. And if she's the only one having to think about it, that can be a very lonely place to feel like you're being labeled controlling and that you're a jerk face for trying to salvage your collective budget.
So you're the boss?
Sometimes. I'm just saying we don't have to focus on a computer on day 2 when it's...
Yeah, okay. So then he says, you're the boss. And she says, sometimes. So that means that she wants to be in that role. Like, if someone did that to me, I'd be like, I'm not the boss. I don't want to be the boss. I'm just concerned about our budget. But I do not want to be your boss. So don't think of me as your boss. Like that. I got other things. I got myself to worry about. I don't want to have to worry about you.
Already a stressful situation. Okay? Thank you. That's it.
Great, Kirk.
Yeah, drop kick that conversation, please.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Her tone wasn't great. I don't know. I feel like their relationship is strong enough they'll be able to rein this in, pull out of the nosedive. All right, well, if you want to support what we're doing here, you can become a patron by clicking the link below or going to patreon.com. By becoming a patron, you are becoming a very real part of this thing that we do here. If it weren't for the patrons, and particularly the upper tier patrons, we would not be able to do any of this sort of stuff. So if you want to support us, go to Patreon and become a patron. And you can help keep this thing moving down the road where one person called me the hardest working person on YouTube, which I find to be a compliment, but also kind of like I should be reevaluating that on a certain level. But I don't know. Once I commit to a certain schedule, I feel committed to it. But anyway, so if you want to keep this thing moving down the road where I work a lot, then become a patron of the podcast, and you can do that if you want. But if not, totally cool. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.